Good morning and welcome to Bible study. Today is August 11th and we are in Judges chapter 4. So we began our journey through Judges last week and we talked about the first several judges, and the trend we're going to see in the book of Judges is that longer and longer periods of time are going to elapse between when the Israelites cry out for help and repent and return to the Lord. So we left off with Shamgar becomes Israel's judge, verse 31, after Ehud. And all we hear about him is he once killed 600 Philistines with an ox goad. So again, not every leader that the Israelites are going to have is going to be a profound leader. Not every leader is going to be someone that they write a lot about. And that's true in life. You know, we have varying levels of legacy. We have varying levels of leadership. And we have varying levels of accomplishment and or trial and trauma in different seasons. And so, you know, Shamgar, we can presume, kind of steered the ship okay, but didn't really do anything remarkable one way or the other. But next we're going to get to Deborah. And Deborah is the first female judge. And we hear in chapter 4, after Ehud's death, the Israelites again did evil in the Lord's sight. So the Lord turned them over to King Jabin of Hazor, a Canaanite king. The commander of his army was Sisera, who lived in Harosheth Hagoyim. Sisera, who had 900 iron chariots, ruthlessly oppressed the Israelites for 20 years. Then the people of the Israel cried out to the Lord for help. So again, it takes 20 years this time. Last time, when Ehud became judge, we knew that it had taken 18 years for them to cry out to the Lord. Before that, with Othniel, it doesn't describe how many years, but it does say, but when they finally cry out, they were delivered. And before that, we knew that it had taken them 10 years. So again, there's this trend of lengthening. So Deborah is the wife of Lapideth, who was a prophet who was judging Israel at that time. She would sit under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites would go to her for judgment. So here early on, we have an example within the Israelite community of women with gifts of discernment, gifts of judgment, gifts of leadership. And the Israelites seek her out because she is capable of sharing her wisdom with others. And so one of the things I think the church has gotten wrong in history is the exclusion of female leadership. And there are still churches today who say that the exclusion of female leadership is based on a biblical mandate or a biblical principle. But if God is the same today as he will be tomorrow and was and is yesterday and in those days, then clearly God is working through women and equipping them with many good gifts. And so Deborah is out sitting under her palm tree in the shade, issuing judgments. And one day, verse 6, she sent for Barak, son of Abinoam, who lived in Kadesh in the land of Naphtali. She said to him, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, commands you. Call out 10,000 warriors from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun at Mount Tabor, and I will call out Sisera, commander of Jabin's army, along with his chariots and warriors, to the Kishon River. There I will give you victory over him." So here we have Deborah strategizing and giving advice to the army. So not only is she a judge, but she is a political leader describing a battle strategy. And we can tell in the next verse how respected she was, because the response to this summons is not, well, who are you to tell me what to do? Or, oh yeah, sure, sounds like a great idea. Or any number of other responses. What Barak then says after her summons is, sure, I will go, but only if you go with me. Anyone who's ever taken on a big project, a big task, or has been engaged in a battle knows that you need leadership right there on the ground. If leadership is not actively involved in the day-to-day, when things go wrong, they go wrong really quickly, and it's hard to get communication and advice. And so Barak says, okay, I trust you, but I need you here with me so that if I need redirection, guidance, or counsel, you're right there. And so she replies, very well, I will go with you, but you will receive no honor in this venture, for the Lord's victory over Sisera will be at the hands of a woman. So Deborah kind of goes, well, all right, but you're giving up your chance to be the person in charge. I will be the person in charge, and I will be the one honored and remembered. She's basically saying, and what we might not hear from this is, okay, are you sure you want me to go? Because the way our society tends to work is prejudiced against women, and so you're gonna, incur a little bit of dishonor or prejudice because of going forward in this way. It's an opportunity for Deborah to say, are you really sure? So Deborah went with Barak to Kadesh. At Kadesh, Barak called together the tribes of Zebulun and Naphtali, and 10,000 warriors went up with him. Deborah also went with him. Now Heber the Kenite, a descendant of Moses' brother-in-law, Hobab, had moved away from the other members of his tribe and pitched his tent by the oak of Zananim near Kadesh. When Sisera was told that Barak, son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor, he called for all 900 of his iron chariots and all of his warriors, and they marched from Harosheth Hagoyim to the Kishon Valley. And then Deborah said to Barak, get ready. This is the day the Lord will give you victory over Sisera, for the Lord is marching ahead of you. So God is on their side, and yet they still need to prepare. They still need to prepare for battle. This gives us the possibility of imagining how God works with us, but not for us. Any good parent, when they're teaching their children to do something, like tie their shoes, there's a moment where you have to transmit the knowledge and let them put it into action. And you can be alongside them, with them, for them, encouraging them, reminding them, and helping them, but you can't do it for them if they are going to learn and do it. And it is the same way with the Israelites going into battle. They have to trust God will give them the strength and do it with them, not for them. So after she gives him this word of encouragement, Barak leads his 10,000 warriors down the slopes of Mount Tabor into battle. When Barak attacked, the Lord threw Sisera and all his chariots and warriors into a panic. Sisera leaped down from his chariot and escaped on foot. Then Barak chased the chariots and the enemy army all the way to Harosheth Hagoyim, killing all of Sisera's warriors. Not a single one was left alive. Now, some of us have more merciful hearts than others. Some of us read this and go, yeah, get him, God. And some of us read this and go, oh, how horrible that all those people died. And why did they all have to die? The Lord is letting what needs to happen for there to be peace for the people in the land. These are tribes and people that have already shown that they cannot live well together. They choose to subjugate one another. They choose to try and conquer one another. They choose to enslave one another. There is no peace for them. And so the way that peace is achieved is by killing off all the fighting men and destroying the chariots. Verse 14. Oh, wait, nope, we already read that. Sorry. Verse 17. Meanwhile, Sisera ran to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, because Heber's family was on friendly terms with King Jabin of Hazor. Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Come into my tent, sir. Come in. Do not be afraid." So he went into her tent, and she covered him with a blanket. "Please give me some water," he said. "I'm thirsty." So she gave him some milk from a leather bag and covered him again. "Stand at the door of the tent," he told her. "If anyone comes and asks you if there is anyone here, say no." But when Sisera fell asleep from exhaustion, Jael quietly crept up to him with a hammer and a tent peg in her hand. Then she drove the tent peg through his temple and into the ground. So he died. Ew. Messy. And yet, you go, why? Well, as a woman, she probably didn't have much choice if he's coming to her for shelter. He's bigger, stronger, and presumably a quite capable warrior, because you didn't become a king or a leader in those days without being a capable warrior. So she doesn't have a choice but to offer him refuge. But when he goes to sleep and is helpless, she seizes the chance to kill him. Now, we don't know why exactly she chooses to kill him, but we can guess. We can make a strategy. We can say, well, if she knows the king is running, then she knows he's already defeated. She knows that there's not an army standing behind him anymore. There's not chariots. He's already out of power. And so if she were to side with him, his people who are chasing him and going to kill him anyway are going to catch up with her. She stands the chance of making good with the other side by killing him. And also, she makes sure she doesn't rain down condemnation on herself by hiding him, because there's no sense making alliances and allegiances with someone who has already lost power and has no possibility of regaining it. So when Barak comes looking for Sisera, Jael went out to meet him, and she said, "Come, and I will show you the man you are looking for." So he followed her into the tent and found Sisera lying there dead with the tent peg through his temple. So on that day, Israel saw God defeat Jabin, the Canaanite king. And from that time on, Israel became stronger and stronger against King Jabin until they finally destroyed him. So she's able to say, look, I'm on your side. Don't need to hurt me. So chapter 5 is called the Song of Deborah, because on that day, Deborah and Barak, son of Abinoam, sang this song. And we'll read it in a moment, but there is a process of writing songs. Whenever we have a large moment in life, and or whenever the tide turns, rejoicing, sadness, victory, defeat, humans tend to commemorate it in song. And the Bible shows us that this has been a process all along. And so modern music always has themes in it of betrayal, despair, victory, honor, anything that has lots of emotion in it. That's why we like it. It stirs on our senses and our emotions. And so this song was meant to do the same thing, to stir up the people who would hear it, to remember the victory of that day and to be spurred on to greater and greater victories. So verse 2, Israel's leader took charge and the people gladly followed. Praise the Lord. Listen, you kings, pay attention, you mighty rulers, for I will sing to the Lord. I will make music to the Lord, the God of Israel. Lord, when you set out from Seir and marched across the field of Edom, and the earth trembled and the cloudy skies poured down rain, the mountains quaked in the presence of the Lord, the God of Mount Sinai, in the presence of the Lord, the God of Israel. In the days of Shamgar, son of Anath, in the days of Jael, people avoided the main roads and travelers stayed on winding pathways. There were few people left in the villages of Israel until Deborah arose as a mother for Israel. So this idea being that the roads weren't safe anymore. People were dying out. People were leaving the villages because they weren't safe. And then Deborah arises as a mother for Israel to guide them back. When Israel chose new gods, war erupted at the city gates, yet not a shield or spear could be seen among 40,000 warriors in Israel. My heart is with the commanders of Israel, with those who volunteered for war. Praise the Lord. Consider this, you who ride on fine donkeys, you who sit on fancy saddle blankets, and you who walk along the road. Listen to the village musicians gathered at the watering holes. They recount the righteous victories of the Lord and the victories of his villagers in Israel. Then the people of the Lord marched down to the city gates. So again, this song is an invitation to remember what God is doing and not rest in our riches and our glory. Verse 12, wake up, Deborah, wake up. Wake up, and sing a song. Arise, Barak, lead your captives away, son of Abinoam. Down from Tabor marched the few against the nobles. The people of the Lord marched down against the mighty warriors. They came down from Ephraim, a land that once belonged to the Amalekites. They followed you, Benjamin, with your troops. From Machir, the commanders marched down. From Zebulun came those who carry a commander's staff. The princes of Issachar were with Deborah and Barak. They followed Barak, rushing into the valley. But in the tribe of Reuben, there was great indecision. Why do you sit at home among the sheepfolds to hear the shepherds whistle for their flocks? Yes, in the tribe of Reuben, there was great indecision. So this song is a reminder of who was with us and who wasn't. Why did you sit at home among the sheep fields to hear the shepherds whistle for their flocks? Yes, in the tribe of Reuben, there was great indecision. Gilead remained east of the Jordan. And why did Dan stay home? Asher sat unmoved at the seashore, remaining in his harbors. But Zebulun risked his life, as did Naphtali on the heights of the battlefield. So remember, in Joshua, things worked because all of the tribes were working together. Here in Judges, we see how the fragmentation of the tribes into valuing their own lands, their own safety, their own preferences, and their own comfort has taken its toll on the country. Verse 19, the kings of Canaan came and fought at Tanakh near Megiddo's springs, but they carried off no silver treasures. The stars fought from heaven. The stars in their orbits fought against Sisera. The Kishon River swept them away. That ancient torrent, the Kishon. March on with courage, my soul. Then the horses' hooves hammered the ground, the galloping of Sisera's mighty steeds. Let the people of Meroz be cursed, and the angels of the Lord, let them utterly be cursed, because they did not come to help the Lord against the mighty warriors. Most blessed among women is Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. May she be blessed above all women who live in tents. Sisera asked for water, and she gave him milk. In a bowl fit for nobles, she brought him yogurt. Then with her left hand, she reached for a tent peg, and with her right hand for the workman's hammer. She struck Sisera with the hammer, crushing his head. With a shattering blow, she pierced his temples. He sank, he fell, he lay at her feet, and where he sank, there he died. So we're calling down curses upon those who would fight against the Lord. We're calling for God to continue the work that has begun. We're reminded that God is the one who sent them into a confusion and a panic and made this great victory possible. And then we're blessing the faithful individual of Jael for acting in a way that forwarded their purposes. From the window, Sisera's mother looked out. Through the window, she watched for his return, saying, "Why is his chariot so long in coming? Why don't we hear the sound of chariots' wheels?" Her wise women answer, and she repeats these words to herself. They must be dividing the captured plunder with a woman or two for every man. There will be colorful robes for Sisera and colorful embroidered robes for me. Yes, the plunder will include colorful robes embroidered on both sides. So the psalm goes so far as to imagine the impact on those left behind. Verse 31, Lord, may all your enemies die like Sisera, but may those who love you rise like the sun in all its power. Then there was peace in the land for 40 years. Chapter 6, we have Gideon. The Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight. Well, that didn't take long. So the Lord handed them over to the Midianites for 7 years. The Midianites were so cruel that the Israelites made hiding places for themselves in the mountains, caves, and strongholds. Whenever the Israelites planted their crops, marauders from Midian, Amalek, and the people of the east would attack Israel, camping in the land and destroying the crops as far away as Gaza. They left the Israelites with nothing to eat, taking all the sheep, goats, cattle, and donkeys. These enemy hordes, coming with their livestock and tents, were as thick as locusts. They arrived on droves of camels, too numerous to count, and they stayed until the land was stripped bare. So Israel was reduced to starvation by the Midianites. Then the Israelites cried out to the Lord for help. Man, it's kind of sad, but very true how we have to hit rock bottom so often before we will cry out for help. The Israelites, it's only 7 years this time, but look at how bad those 7 years had to be for them to cry out for help. Nevertheless, in verse 7, when they cried out to the Lord because of Midian, the Lord sent a prophet to the Israelites, and he said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I brought you up out of slavery in Egypt. I rescued you from the Egyptians and from all who oppressed you. I drove out your enemies and gave you their land. I told you, I am the Lord your God. You must not worship the gods of the Amorites in whose land you now live, but you have not listened to me." Then the angel of the Lord came and sat beneath the great tree at Oprah. It's actually Ophrah, but Oprah spells it without that H, which belonged to the Joash of the clan of Abiezer. Gideon, son of Joash, was threshing wheat at the bottom of a winepress to hide the grain from the Midianites. The angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, "Mighty hero, the Lord is with you." "Sir," Gideon replied, "if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us?" I think that's a really fair question. And I think that we too often either assume that the Lord is with us blindly, regardless of whatever we do, or when we are in pain or suffering or struggling, we say, "The Lord is against us," because surely this has to be a curse or some kind of retribution or punishment. But it's not always about what we've done individually. It's often the communal sin that is in the world around us that causes hardships. And so what is the response here? He asks again, "And where are all the miracles our ancestors told us about? Didn't they say the Lord brought us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and handed us over to the Midianites." And the Lord turned to him and said, "Go with the strength you have and rescue Israel from the Midianites. I am sending you." Gideon says, "Okay, God, where are you? Why aren't you fixing this? Why aren't you solving this?" And God so often in our response to our complaints says, "I am fixing it. I'm sending you." Great. There's a saying in the church, "Don't complain about what you don't want to work on." This idea that, again, God equips us to fix the things in which we are most aggrieved by and or suffering with. So verse 15, Gideon's response, "But Lord, how can I rescue Israel? My clan is the weakest in the whole tribe of Manasseh, and I am the least in my entire family. Remember how we talked again about this trend of subversion, that we often think of leaders as a specific type, the strongest, the fastest, the smartest, the most handsome. And yet God often chooses the unexpected. Just before, God chose a woman. Now God chooses the youngest son of the itty-bittiest little tribe, of the least of any of the major tribes of Israel. And he's going, really? Me? How can I do that? How can someone who has no honor in our culture raise up people to fight? And the Lord responds and says to him in verse 16, I will be with you, and you will destroy the Midianites as if you were fighting against one man. Verse 17, Gideon replied, if you are truly going to help me, show me a sign to prove that it is really the Lord speaking to me. Don't go away until I come back and bring my offering to you. So Gideon asks for a sign. Gideon makes a challenge to the Lord. He puts God to the test because, again, this seems pretty crazy. This seems like a way to die. This seems like a way to suffer even more when you already have not so great of a life. And so he says, all right, if you really want me to do this, this is the sign I need. So the angel of the Lord answers, I will stay here until you return. So Gideon hurries home. He cooks a young goat, and with a basket of flour, he bakes some bread without yeast. Then carrying the meat in a basket and the broth in a pot, he brought them out and presented them to the angel who was under the great tree. The angel of God said to him, place the meat and the unleavened bread on this rock and pour the broth over it. And Gideon did as he was told. Then the angel of the Lord touched the meat and the bread with the tip of his staff in his hand, and fire flamed up from the rock and consumed all he had brought. And then the angel of the Lord disappeared. So we have a repetition of a sign. Sacrifice is their sign. Fire is a sign from God ever since the burning bush. Things being on fire that shouldn't be able to be on fire, or at least not in that way, is one of the signs that Gideon would know and recognize. And so by pouring the broth over it, we've made it virtually impossible for this thing to catch fire. And yet, sure enough, it does. So how does Gideon respond when he realizes it's really God? He cries out, "O sovereign Lord, I'm doomed. I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face." I wonder how often when we approach our greatest blessings, we go, oh no, I'm doomed. Because we don't feel worthy of what we're being called to. We don't trust ourselves, and we don't fully trust God, that God loves us enough to want us just as we are. And so there's a response. It is all right, the Lord replied. Do not be afraid. You will not die. And Gideon builds an altar to the Lord there and names it Yahweh Shalom, which means the Lord is peace, or I am peace, because Yahweh is I am. I am peace. Isn't that the truth? God is peace. And where there is peace, there is God, especially peace in times that don't feel peaceful. Peace in times that there's stress or struggle. Where you find peace, there you will find the Lord. So the altar remains in Ophrah in the land of the clan of Abiezer to this day. That night the Lord said to Gideon, take the second bull from your father's herd, the one that is 7 years old, pull down your father's altar to Baal, and cut down the Asherah pole standing beside it. Then build an altar to the Lord your God here on this hilltop sanctuary, laying the stones carefully. Sacrifice the bull as a burnt offering on the altar, using the fuel of the wood of the Asherah pole you cut down. Dun, dun, dun. So I have this underlined because it tells us some really significant stuff, all in a couple lines. What do we know? Gideon is a faithful God-fearer and of a son of a father who is not. His father had turned to false gods and false idols. This is one of those verses that gives me hope, because God is continually seeking after us, even if we have generations in our own family that go astray, even if we have generations in the world that are completely fallen away, living away from God. God reveals that he's continually at work in the world, continually seeking out people who are open to experiencing him. And therefore, there is always a path of restoration, no matter how dark and bleak it gets. So verse 27, Gideon took 10 of his servants and did as the Lord had commanded, but he did it at night because he was afraid of the other members of his father's household and the people of the town. Well, yeah, people don't tend to like it when they feel their holy things are attacked. They don't tend to like it when we destroy things that people value. So early the next morning, as the people of the town began to stir, someone discovered that the altar of Baal had been broken down and that the Asherah pole beside it had been cut down. And in their place, a new altar had been built, and on it were the remains of the bull that had been sacrificed. The people said to each other, "Who did this?" And after asking around and making a careful search, they learned it was Gideon, the son of Joash. A secret is never a secret if more than two people know about it. He brought 10 servants to help him do this work. Of course, it was going to get out. So in verse 30, they go to the father and they say, "Bring out your son." The men of the town demanded of Joash, "He must die for destroying the altar of Baal and for cutting down the Asherah pole." But Joash shouted to the mob that confronted him, "Why are you defending Baal? Will you argue his case? Whoever pleads his case will be put to death by morning. If Baal truly is a god, let him defend himself and destroy the one who broke down his altar." So we see that Joash's love for his son overcomes any loyalty to false gods. And so he says, if what he did was so bad and so wrong, don't you think your all-powerful God would do something about it? Let God fix it if it's really God. And so we know Baal is not really God, and that is not what happens. So from then on, Gideon is called Jerub-Baal, which means let Baal defend himself, because he broke down Baal's altar. So Gideon goes through this victory. He lives through this thing that he didn't probably think he'd live through, but pretty soon he's feeling scared again and wants another sign. Soon afterward, the armies of Midian, Amalek, and the people of the east formed an alliance against Israel and crossed the Jordan, camping in the valley of Jezreel. Then the Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon with power. He blew a ram's horn as a call to arms, and the men of the clan of Abiezar came to him. He also sent messengers throughout Manasseh, Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, summoning their warriors, and all of them responded. So we see that the people are beginning to trust him as a leader. Sure, he's a younger son. Sure, he's of a tiny little tribe, but he overturns false idols and gets away with it. So maybe, just maybe, God is working with him. And so the people respond, and Gideon says to God in verse 36, "If you are truly going to use me to rescue Israel as you promised, prove it to me in this way. I will put a wool fleece on the threshing floor tonight. If the fleece is wet with dew in the morning, but the ground is dry, then I will know that you are going to help me rescue Israel as you promised." So Gideon struggles with self-doubt. Gideon still doesn't feel worthy. He still doesn't feel capable. He's like, "Okay, God, I did what you said. I got the army, but I don't know. Show me it's going to be okay." So he asks for the fleece to be wet, and that is just what happened. And Gideon gets up the next morning. He squeezes the fleece and wrung out a whole bowl full of water. And then Gideon says to God, So I don't want you to be angry with me, but let me make one more request. Let me use the fleece for one more test. This time let the fleece remain dry while the ground around it is wet with dew. You go, really? Well, think about it this way. He probably set up the test in the wrong way, and he begins to doubt because he's like, if it were just normal dew, of course the fleece would be wet, but because the fleece was shielding the ground, then the ground would be dry. And how do I know this is really God and not just what was going to happen anyway? And so he says, all right, I need you to do the reverse of what is natural. This time, let the fleece remain dry while the ground around it is wet with dew. So that night, God did as Gideon asked, and the fleece was dry in the morning, but the ground was wet and covered with dew. I love God's patience with Gideon. I love God's willingness to reassure him that, yes, I have chosen you. Yes, I'm working with you. And okay, I'll give you the reassurance that you need. Chapter 7, Gideon defeats the Midianites. So Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and his army got up early and went as far as the spring of Harod. The armies of Midian were camped north of them in the valley near the hill of Moreh. The Lord said to Gideon, you have too many warriors with you. If I let all of you fight the Midianites, the Israelites will boast to me that they saved themselves by their own strength. Therefore tell the people, whoever is timid or afraid may leave this mountain and go home. So 22,000 of them went home, leaving only 10,000 who were willing to fight. But the Lord told Gideon, there are still too many. Bring them down to the spring, and I will test them to determine who will go with you and who will not. When Gideon took his warriors down to the water, the Lord told him, divide the men into two groups. In one group, put all those who cup the water in their hands and lap it up with their tongues like dogs. In the other group, put all those who kneel down and drink with their mouths in the stream. Only 300 of the men drank from their hands. All the others got down on their knees and drank with their mouths in the stream. The Lord told Gideon, with these 300 men, I will rescue you and give you victory over the Midianites. Send all the others home. And here's Gideon probably going, what? Why? Why would I do that? That seems foolishness. Again, God's subversion is actively working for us to recognize that he's in control in ways that we are not. And so it's significant. He picks the ones that lap like dogs, meaning they are the littlest, the least of these, the most uncouth, the roughest, the least sophisticated. And yet this is who God chooses to work with. So Gideon collected the provisions and the ram's horns of the other warriors and sent them home. But he kept the 300 men with him. I bet at this point, Gideon's like, well, I'm glad I put the Lord to the test, and he did all those things that I thought were impossible, so I guess I can trust him in this too. So the Midianite camp was in the valley just below Gideon, and that night the Lord says, get up, go down into the Midianite camp, for I have given you the victory over them. But if you're afraid to attack, go down to the camp with your servant Purah. Listen to what the Midianites are saying, and you will be greatly encouraged. Then you will be eager to attack. So again, God offers the opportunity for reassurance. So Gideon took Purah, went down to the edge of the enemy camp. The armies of Midian, Amalek, and the people of the east had settled in the valley like a swarm of locusts. Their camels were like grains of sand on the seashore, too many to count. Then Gideon crept up just as a man was telling his companion about a dream. The man said, I had this dream, and in my dream, a loaf of barley bread came tumbling down in the Midianite camp. It hit a tent, turned it over, and knocked it flat. His companion answered, your dream can only mean one thing. God has given Gideon, son of Joash, the Israelite, victory over Midian and all its allies. When Gideon heard the dream and its interpretation, he bowed and worshiped before the Lord. Then he returned to the Israelite camp and shouted, get up, for the Lord has given you victory over the Midianite hordes. He divided the 300 men into 3 groups and gave each man a ram's horn and a clay jar with a torch in it. Then he said to them, keep your eyes on me. When I come to the edge of the camp, do just as I do. As soon as I and those are with me blow the ram's horn, blow yours too. all around the entire camp and shout for the Lord and for Gideon. It was just after midnight, after changing of the guard, when the Gideon and the 100 men with him reached the edge of the Midianite camp. Suddenly they blew the ram's horn and broke their clay jars. And all three groups blew their horns and broke their jars. They held the blazing torches in their left hands and the horns in their right hands, and they all shouted, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." Each man stood at his position around the camp, watched as all the Midianites rushed around in a panic, shouting as they ran to escape. When the 300 Israelites blew their ram's horns, the Lord caused the warriors in the camp to fight against each other with their swords. Those who were not killed fled to places as far as Beth-shittah near Zererah and to the border of Abel-Meholah near Tabbath. Then Gideon sent for the warriors of Naphtali, Asher, and Manasseh, who joined in chasing the army of Midian. Gideon also sent messengers throughout the hill country of Ephraim, saying, "Come down to attack the Midianites. Cut them off at the shallow crossings of the Jordan River at Beth-barah." So all the men of Ephraim did as they were told. They captured Oreb and Zeb, the 2 Midianite commanders, killing Oreb at the rock of Oreb and Zeb at the winepress of Zeb, and they continued to chase the Midianites. Afterward, the Israelites brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon, who was killed by Gideon wasn't killed. He was by the Jordan River. So we're going to leave off there today, and we'll pick up in chapter 8 next week. But again, Gideon gives us this message that you begin with what you have, trusting that it's enough and that God will amplify and work it through to fruition if God is with you. So I really enjoy the story of Gideon, and I hope you did too. I'm going to end our recording today.